Ramadan fasting is something that a lot of us experience, once every year. It goes on for 30 days or so. It's a long process. It's a spiritual reset. But we actually stopped and thought about the other health benefits of it and what happens inside our body when we're fasting, especially for prolonged periods and consistent periods. Yes, there's the worship element, and you've got the discipline, cutting foods and reintroducing foods at certain times. But there's actually a lot more that goes on inside our bodies, which is fascinating in a way that it's a whole reset. And I'm going to go through it in this video as much as I can. So the first point I want to direct your attention to is the metabolic switch that happens. So fasting gives our bodies a bit of a break. So imagine, you're having breakfast and lunch and dinner and snacks in between. In a way, our bodies doesn't really get much of a break in the sense of how much things are being metabolized. Because if you think, every time you introduce a food, whatever it is, it has a number of chemical elements in a way, or entities that the body needs to metabolize. So, we could be talking about 1,000 different molecules on a daily basis, even more. So imagine giving a full rest to your liver and as well as, intestines and the digestive system as a whole. So we generally are in a storage mode. So the more you eat, you store, you use that energy. And what happens in Ramadan is that we're switching from that storage to a burning mode. So the first step that happens is, when you just had your suhoor or your breakfast as such, is you start breaking the glycogen reserves in the liver into glucose, the free fuel for the cells. So that happens initially, but then the body starts going through something completely different, where something which is starts reducing suddenly, which is insulin. Insulin as a whole is circulating to metabolize our carbs and the sugar in general for us to consume it. And as insulin levels start going down, we go fully into that burning mode. And that's the key. So the body now starts being much more fuel efficient. And at the same time, it's resetting the way it's looking at food and it's recognizing food. So if you think of insulin being elevated, and then what happens to our body when there's too much insulin is the body starts utilizing cortisol to store that excess sugar into fat. Cortisol is the hormone that always says, yeah, I'm happy to get more and more, and then the fat cells are always receiving those. But what happens when you go through prolonged periods of fasting, such as Ramadan, is you're going more into the burning. So that's a whole re-education and a reset for your system. The second thing that happens is what we call a cellular repair and autophagy. Our cells usually go through a process called autophagy, and autophagy just means cell, the direct translation is cell eating, and that translates into recycling, cellular recycling. So if you think our cells go through a life cycle, and at some stage, you have cells that are senescent, that are not functioning really well, and that are there just being a burden to the system. Unless there is a switch off mechanism, such as fasting, the body doesn't always go through this autophagy. And the more you fast and the continuous the fast, so for instance, if you're doing it several days in a row, and it's actually been shown that after about 3 or 4 days is when autophagy starts kicking in. And so that's when the body starts recycling the cells. So it breaks it down into the products and then recycles them. And it's such an important process because unless, imagine, you've got all this rubbish accumulating, and unless that rubbish is being recycled, it's just there as dead cells that aren't doing much, and they're just providing further toxicity, and they could be, potentially going into, precancerous or something that's very nasty for the system. The third bit is what we call a gut health reset. And so we've got, 80% of our immune system, if not more, is found within our gut, and that's your microbiome. That's that's what we call the probiotic in a way as such, or the healthy bacteria. And what happens is, as you fast, you're almost starving certain types of bacteria that usually lives off sugar and things that have that provide quick fuel. So that's the wrong bacteria that you don't want in there. And as you're starving off that bacteria, what happens? You start regaining some of the other bacteria that's more beneficial and creating that diversity. So, for instance, if we should have 50 phylum or families or of various bacteria, and we only have 3 or 4 because we're always eating the same type of food and we're not really giving our system a break, then you end up with things like E. coli and all these kind of nasty ones that start increasing in the numbers. Whereas the nice and the other healthier bacteria that should be there helping with getting rid of toxins and metabolizing and cleaning and boosting your immune system, reducing the inflammation, are reducing. So what fasting does, especially ongoing continuous fasting, is that it resets this diversity, and you have suddenly like a rainforest of bacteria that lives all in harmony, rather than just 1 or 2 predators that are just living off the rest. The last point I want to touch on is the mental clarity and the brain and mood benefits when you're doing the Ramadan fasting. So with its effect on the gut bacteria being one thing, that helps reduce the inflammation, which sometimes we all have certain element of inflammation that can potentially travel to the brain, and it can affect, give us a bit of a brain fog. And that's interestingly why when you start fasting at the beginning, the first thing you feel is you feel a bit more tired, you can't focus. Well, first of all is you starve the glucose, so the brain needs to start looking for other fuels, such as from the ketones. But secondly, you're actually starving off that bacteria, and that bacteria is sending the signal, the wrong type of bacteria, that the body actually that I need them. But by constantly starving them, you're resetting not only your bacteria, but your neurotransmitters, so your dopamine, your serotonin, noradrenaline, etc. So when you reset these neurotransmitters, the brain starts working more efficiently. You have better focus, and that's why a lot of people that do prolonged fasting notice that the focus has increased. One of the other reasons for that is something called brain-derived neurotrophic factors, or BDNF, which is highly linked to fasting. So as the body starts going through that mode, BDNF levels increase. That also helps with things like tiredness, fatigue, anxiety, usually the things associated with mental health. So are you going through that prolonged fasting? That will that has a positive effect on the mental well-being. So that's all great, and I think we've learned about all the benefits. But one thing we need to be very careful about is, what do you eat when you break the fast? So you can actually have all these amazing benefits, but you just eat something wrong and you've actually eliminated all these benefits. So it's very important that you feed on the foods that are usually have a longer metabolism and a slower metabolism throughout the day. So they're fuels that will help you sustain sort of the day, but also they're not going to cause any sort of spikes or troughs in terms of the sugar. So we're talking about the protein, whether it's fish protein or animal or plant protein. We're talking about the complex carbohydrates, so oats, sweet potatoes, things like that. We're also talking about things like healthy fats, which will help put you in that ketone or ketotic state. And ketone is one of the best ways the body gets the fuel, especially for the brain energy. So as you fast, you start becoming, especially towards the end of the day, the last few hours, after doing about 6-7 hours, the body switches into a slightly more ketotic mode. And ketones are one of the best fuels for the brain. So all this mental clarity, this focus, this BDNF activation happens with that. So it's important that, when you break the fast, you can have, a few days, but don't eat until you're full. So you should be aiming to eat and before you reach that fullness, and try not to get the food, especially at the beginning, that will spike that sugar, because remember, spike of sugar causes high insulin causes inflammation, cortisol, and then it's a vicious cycle. So you've actually gone through this amazing effects throughout the day and then negated it when you break. So no, direct sugars when you have that. No, not too much eating in terms of carbohydrate, and have a good balance in terms of fiber and fat and protein, especially these three elements that will help get the best out of your fasting. So my last point is, having gone through 30 days of fasting, it's important that we think in terms of what has happened in our system, because that helps us prioritize the foods that will enable us to get sort of the full benefit of the fasting. It's a whole reset for the system, for the organs, cleanses your liver, your kidney, your gut, resets your microbiome, resets your neurotransmitters, boost that cellular repair and autophagy, and sets you on a better mental and spiritual well-being.
Amazing, doctor. I've learned so much. So I wanted to ask you, what is BDNF?
So brain-derived nootropic factors is a factor that helps boost and optimize the brain cells. It helps balance the other neurotransmitters, and it just sort of generally helps with more focus, more concentration. And it's something that gets produced mostly during sort of healthier sleep, or also during fasting.
Amazing. And the last question is, I've heard that fasting can make your body metabolically flexible. Can you explain what that is, and is that even true?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all sometimes notice that you go into the gym, you're restricting, you're not eating as much, and your body's still kind of stuck. It's not, you're not metabolizing as well, let's say. So when you do fasting, you're actually shocking your body, and it just resets the way it metabolizes, and that's because of this glycogen, storage that has been depleted, but also because of the insulin resistance. You're reducing your insulin resistance. As a result, the body becomes switched on in terms of metabolizing quicker and go to burning mode as opposed to storage mode. Thank you very much. So please do like, share, and subscribe. And if you want more of this content, or if you've got any other recommendations or any thoughts, please comment and leave some thoughts in there. I'll be happy to incorporate any ideas into future videos.